When I was a toddler growing up in the mid-90s, I lived in an old two-story house on an old apple orchard in central Massachusetts with my parents and later my two siblings. During my time there, I had trouble sleeping. In my waking nightmares, I would see shadowy figures dancing among the dark corners of my room. Walking downstairs in the middle of the night was like entering an alien world, a hostile one, where dangers lurked in every corner and every impossible idea in the daytime suddenly became perfectly reasonable at night. And with bleary eyes and muddled thoughts, a face in the shadows was not so unheard of to the younger eyes. We moved out of that house when I was 10, and then to the city when I was 13. By then, my fears began to take on more realistic worries. School, sports, friends, crushes, trying to explain to my parents why I was doing so lousy with my grades. It was also during this time that my love of horror movies came about, from slashers like Halloween and Friday the 13th, to silly ones like Dog Soldiers and Shaun of the Dead, and eventually to more subtle ones like Blair Witch Project, It Follows, Jacob's Ladder, and more recently, The Night House. But I never experienced anything close to what I experienced as a kid again. That is, until the last week of January 2023, when I went to see the film Skinamarink by director Kyle Edward Ball. Skinamarink is the story of two children trapped in their home, with their parents missing and something sinister lurking in the dark. If you are someone who grew up with night terrors, this film will not only remind you of that time, it will grab you by the shoulders and violently teleport you back into those long, dark nights. And the fact that this movie also takes place in the mid-90s does nothing to comfort this fact. Right off the bat, the film takes an interesting approach in that the faces of our characters are never directly shown on camera. At most, we get the back of their heads, at least we see their feet and hear their whispered voices. Indeed, a lot of the actual action of the movie appears to take place just off camera or in the corner of the frame. And I know for most of you this is the greatest of cinema sins, having all the action and plot not being directly shown. But it's a testament to the organic feeling of the experience that things are just off screen, creatures are just out of view, and that nagging feeling that something is right there, out of your peripheral. And when you turn your head to look, you see nothing at all, only to repeat the same experience time and again. It really gives that claustrophobic feeling that you're alone in a house, but not really alone. You see, Skinamarink is not so much a story as it is an experience. The story is inconsequential. Anyone who has lived the nightmare scenario of being 5 years old and awake in a dark, quiet house already knows the story. It's one they lived over and over before. The dark hallways and eerie noises your mind tricks you into hearing is already ingrained in their cerebral cortex, along with their first lay, or the birth of their siblings or their children. Skinamarink offers no answers to the darkness it portrays, only an ominous sense of dread that will never fully go away, no matter how old you get and how much of the world you've experienced. There are very few jump scares in this movie, and what jump scares there are very much earned, built up after a period of looming dread. Because they are used so infrequently, anticipating them or predicting when they'll strike is next to impossible. This, in my opinion, is the best way to include jump scares. As much as I love films like Sinister and The Conjuring, their brilliance is neutered by what I feel are an overabundance of jump scares and orchestra stings that the films don't need. The hallway scene in Sinister is my biggest example. How much more effective would this scene be if the music and stings were taken out of it, just letting the scene speak for itself? Infinitely, is what I say. Now let's compare the bedroom scene in Skinamarink. Nothing jumps in your face, nothing screams in your ears. The apparitions of the parents speaking so softly that you have to strain to hear them even with the subtitles on. The father telling the daughter to look under the bed, which in normal horror logic means something is going to jump out at us and attack. But instead we see nothing, and it only serves to transition the father out of the scene and the mother into it for her only appearance in the film. It's such a deeply unsettling moment with none of the traditional Hollywood touch, and it makes for one of the scariest scenes in the movie with symbolism galore. Indeed, much of Skinamarink is steeped into symbolism, and it's not too hard to understand what it's for, even if the film never outright says it. The vast majority of the film is giving enough exposition for the audience to either make deductions for themselves or forever leave up to interpretation, but the overall symbolism of the house is for me quite clear. Trapped in a dark house alone, all the windows and doors leading to the outside and safety mysteriously vanished. The parents sitting on opposite ends of the bed, not looking at each other or their child. The slow dissolving of their safe haven as the monsters take control. This is a house of depression and sorrow. There are subtle hints throughout that the parents' marriage is falling apart, from the phone call in the beginning to the sister not wanting to talk about their mother, and whatever problems are causing the rift is seeping through the house to the children, and ultimately everyone ends up paying for it. As I said before, the story isn't ultra important to the experience of Skinamarink, but the hidden story we do get add a layer of complexity to this already heavy situation. But it wasn't the underlying plot that had me shaking when the film was over, and it wasn't the parents' marital problems that had me go immediately to the wine cabinet and pour myself a drink when I got home. It was the atmosphere of this house. It was the feeling of being truly alone in a house that seemingly wants you dead. It was the subtle things that the house did to mess with the kids, from putting a chair on the ceiling to removing the doors and windows, and even the downstairs toilet for no reason other than it could. This entity has no name, no identity. It is simply the darkness. The monster we always feared was under our bed or in our closet, here in its real form to claim us. No answers are offered in Skinamarink. No explanation is given. The director merely presents the scenario and lets you draw your own conclusions. This, I believe, is the best way to handle it. What our minds make up is scarier than any monster they could put physical form to. We're no strangers to stories of the kids besting their childhood demons. The beauty of fantasy is that it shows us that the dragons can be beaten, and we can overcome what scarred us as kids. But Skinamarink does something bold. The kids don't win in the end. In the end, they too get swallowed by the darkness of this house. Instead of showing us the monster getting bested, this movie preys upon our worst fear, what kept us up at nights to all hours. It shows that we can lose. It shows that the darkness can win. It shows that kids aren't invincible. It's a jarring reminder that even kids aren't above succumbing to the nightmares. And I think that's why this movie is so terrifying to me. It's everything I was afraid of. And it's what could have happened. Skinamarink is not going to be winning any story writing awards or acting awards or anything that we normally judge films by. But it is a film that will stay with you for many nights, and if you are someone like me, will serve as a terrible reminder of what it was like to lay awake at night, wondering if that shadow in the corner is actually getting closer. It's an atmospheric tour down childhood trauma lane that hits as close to the nerve as a film is ever going to get. If you want a great story, you're probably better off elsewhere. But if you want an experience that will stay with you long after you've seen it, then yeah, this is the film for you. The last thing I want to talk about is the living room. When we were kids, we always had that room that was safe. The comfortable bed, or leaving the TV on so the sounds of mindless babble can interrupt the awful silence. The game room where your toys are. Kids find their solace in those rooms. They find their escape. And no matter who you are, you remember when you had a designated no man's land to escape the terrors that haunted you. But what happens when the safe zone gets invaded? The toys go missing. The TV starts fritzing out. Something is under the bed and it is calling your name. Skinamarink dares to set up the safe room, and then bit by bit takes the safe room away from the kids, until the sanctuary eventually becomes just another hall in the ever-expanding labyrinth. And that's something unique to it. As kids, we hold on to that notion of a safe room, but this movie tells us that nowhere is safe from the night terrors. That if it wants you, it will get you. And all the magic of childhood can't keep you safe. There are subtle hints throughout that the parents' marriage is falling apart.
Isaac, I'm trying to record, little dude.